this cruise was absolutely making a statement that jazz is about encounters and meeting each other. People who are listening to music meeting each other, and people who play music meeting each other, and musicians meeting listeners. It was all about meetings and discovery, you know, and I think everyone on this ship is a different person now than they were 9 days ago when they got on the ship, you know, and that's a pretty profound thing to say, but I really believe that that's true, that everyone in the situation was changed.
Marcus Miller!
Yeah. Listen, this next guy, about 1989, I was in a small jazz club in New York. It's called Bradley's. The band is playing, and in walks this little kid, man, with a hat like this, right? And a trumpet. He pulls his trumpet out, man, and he blows the roof down on this joint, right? And I said, who is this guy? Well, it was this next artist, okay? So please give it up for Roy Hargrove. Roy Hargrove!
I think that people want to hear good music, whether it's jazz or whatever it is. If you're playing jazz, the problem, a lot of times, I'm not saying every time, but a lot of the time, the problem with jazz players is they tend to want to alienate the audience. In other words, I guess what I mean is they want to show how intelligent they are and how, you know, deep they are into the music, so they, you know, they play music sometimes that goes over the audience head. The person that doesn't know anything about music or jazz that's listening doesn't get it, because it's too complicated, it's too many notes, it's strange sounding, you know. I mean, if you think about cats like the Heath brothers and, you know, Dizzy when he was still around, and people like Jimmy Cobb and Idris Muhammad and Walter Booker when he was here, John Hicks when he was around, you know. When these guys would play, there was always an element of beauty within the sound. So I'm saying that the jazz musician of today has to inject beauty into the music somehow. I'm not against being progressive, but I think that it should still be beautiful, and it still should somehow reach the heart of the person that's listening. You know, not just the head, but the heart as well.
Roy Hargrove is an unbelievable musician, and he's unique in that he's not afraid, you know. He's really honest. He's like, yes, I'm a jazz musician, and I studied the past, you know, and I know all my masters, Kenny Dorham, Clifford Brown, Lee Morgan, Freddie Hubbard. I've studied them all, you know, and I love that music, and he plays that music a lot. But he also grew up in the 80s and the 90s, you know, with hip-hop blasting off the radios, you know what I mean? And he was part of that environment. And so naturally, his thing is, hey, I'm going to find a way to combine them. I'm going to find a way to have all the things I love at one place, you know? So that's what he's been doing, man. And you'll hear him do a straight-ahead record. You'll hear him do a hip-hop record. You'll hear him do R&B. But, you know, he retains his identity, you know what I mean? Because he has such a beautiful, strong personality on his instrument. And so I'm really proud of him, man. He's only 36 years old, man, but he may as well be 56 in terms of all the stuff he's done, you know? And he really influenced a lot of young musicians, too, not to be afraid, not to feel like you have to stay in one bag, you know? You can do your thing and be honest, and that's the most important thing.
I've known Roy since 2000. Roy is really like a sponge, because I've seen him work with the Cubans, with Chucho Valdés and Los Van Van. He can pretty much absorb any musical language. And of course, he has some specific things in his background, being from Texas. He's got a lot of feel for gospel music, and he knows a lot about funk, R&B. So he has a lot of multiple things in his background that add to also his capacity to absorb new languages. So this makes for a lot of possibility and things to do. So that's why he did, you know, the Cuban project, and then he went on and did the RH Factor, which is a funk album. And you know, he has a big band also. He writes for big band, small group, duos. You know, he has a lot of a wide span of things that he can do, and a lot of more I think he has in the can that we haven't seen it yet.
I noticed that when I go around to some of the jazz schools, the young players don't really focus so much on tradition anymore. You know, it's all really about being very progressive, and that has its place too. But I think that the tradition is very important. You know, a lot of times the young players, they think it's corny to play standards and to, you know, get into bebop and things like that. So they go on with the strange chords and the different odd meters, and I understand you have to play your stuff, you have to be who you are, but you have to learn the Great American Songbook. You have to learn what Charlie Parker and Thelonious Monk and Bud Powell and these guys were dealing with. You have to learn that. That's part of the music too. You have to deal with the entire spectrum so that you have a place to go when you want to express yourself. You have things to grab from. You know, if that box is empty, then what do you have? You got nothing. You got what you think might be, your expression is going to be limited, I guess that's what I mean. When I started doing that project, RH Factor, it was my intention or goal to try to remove the boundaries between, you know, the jazz people and the mainstream musicians, so that we could work together. You know, because oftentimes, you know, even when I was going to school at Berkeley, there was always like these dividing lines between the jazz guys and the funk guys and the gospel people and the hip hop, whatever. It was always, you know, nobody hung out with each other. But I hung out with everybody, you know. And so I never really saw those dividing lines. I always felt like it was always just like a vast world of music that you can explore and, you know, do whatever you want to do as long as you have the tools. So, you know, when I started doing this, it was a combination of two things. It was, I wanted to make a tribute to the music that I was listening to as a child that sort of made me have a love for music in the first place, which is a lot of the music that my father collected, you know, Parliament, Booker T and the MGs, Chuck Brown, the Soul Searchers, the ADC band, all that music that my father had on record, I wanted to do a tribute to that. And it was also because I wanted to kind of erase the barriers between the different genres of musicians. Because oftentimes I would go into sessions at the studio with guys. If they knew I was a jazz player, you know, they'd kind of be like a little frozen, you know, like, oh, this guy, he thinks he's really smart, huh? You know. So I'd have to I had to be humble, you know, and change my way of thinking about playing. Because, you know, sometimes if you have a lot of information, you know, it's a challenge to not use it all. Or to, like, sort of make it different. Like, I find when I play in situations like more R&B, that you have to play less and add. Your role becomes, as a horn player, your role becomes more towards adding to the ensemble, to the whole group effort. It's not about you being the soloist and playing all these a bunch of notes. Because that's the first way that the people start looking at you cross-eyed, like, what are you doing? That's too jazzy. They use that word, too jazzy. First part is an A flat, A triad.
A triad?
Yeah. Starting on the A. Dun, 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 up to C. Dun, 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 da, 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 151.
E flat.
E flat. Yeah. E da. Yeah, that's it.
Roy's my boy. Grew up in Texas. I'm from Texas, and Keith we're all from Dallas. So been knowing each other for years, since high school, you know, junior high and that type of thing. Roy is incredible. You know, I think Roy is one of all-time best, you know, trumpet players of all times, you know. Right there with Freddie Hubbard, Miles, Winton, and, you know, hands down, he's the man. When I got into the band, he was trying to do something new. He was trying to do a funky thing. So we did, he came to the house, he was like, hey man, I got these tunes, man, I just want to do something different. He sat down at my piano and he just started playing all these tunes that he had written. And so I said, well, why don't we just try to record some stuff here at the house? And during that time, I was getting my studio together. We just played all of his charts, and which was the birth of the RH Factor record. And then I think that was like 1999 or 2000 or something. Then out of that, we went to, I guess the demos went great, what we recorded in my house. So finally, Verve gave us a budget, and we went to New York City and recorded probably over 30, 40 songs. Those songs and more. So that was the birth of Roy's thing.
Me and Roy, we grew up together. You know, we met when we were like in the 6th grade, and we ended up going to the same junior high schools and high schools, and we've been in various bands together. So, you know, it's like that. Me and him have a connection that's unexplainable. You know, I don't even know what to say about that one. I just love playing with him. I miss the RH Factor because we got to do a lot of different things. But you know, Roy's, you know, he does his jazz thing, and I've done a few of his jazz gigs as well. But I think Justin Robinson is his normal saxophone player. But occasionally, when he has room to, you know, add another voice to it, he will call me to that. But when the RH Factor, I was the original sax player in RH Factor, and I co-wrote a lot of those songs that was on those first 2 records as well.
improvisation, you know, it's also a challenge to be able to get in touch with your creative side in that way when you're recording, because there's no audience really. You're forced to deal with yourself, you know. It's like performing in front of a huge mirror, you know, because you really have to, you know, go inside to be able to get it, you know. You have to get that live feeling like you're actually, you know, in the performance element. It's a little bit difficult when you don't have an audience to react from or with, because you're not getting any feedback or response. So it becomes a challenge, you know, when that red light goes on, you have to really find something. A lot of people can't deal with it. Sometimes they freak out when the red light comes on. I had my moments, you know, when I first started recording, you know, when they say, all right, rolling, I'd be like, hey, can we do it again? Let's do it again. But then I learned later, you know, a lot of times the first and second take is the one, even with the mistakes. I used to make guys mad. When I was doing the first RH Factor record, they would get mad at me because everybody wanted to fix everything. Can I do it again? Can I fix it? Like, no, you got to live with it. Well, I mean, I learned from people like Monk, and I mean, they're examples. They're things I read, of course. I never met them. I'm too young. But Monk and Duke Ellington, you know, that first take or the second take is usually the one, because after that, then you start to sort of imitate yourself. I guess I could say that every individual has inside like a little bell that rings. Like you have your own kind of music that you like. There's something that rings your bell. You know, for some people it's jazz. Some people it might be hip hop. Some people it might be techno. It might be country and western. Whatever it is. Sometimes everyone has their thing that they like. And music is a special thing because it makes you feel things like, you know, I don't know if this has happened to you, but it's happened to me. When I hear a song from like when I was maybe 12 years old, I can almost smell the same smells that I smelled then when I hear the song. Well, music's powerful, man. It gets into your body, huh?
I met David Sanborn a long time ago. I actually had braces on my teeth when I met David Sanborn. I was 18 or 19 years old. And we met. I was making a name for myself as a young musician in New York, as a young bass player. And David's producer called me to play on a song for David Sanborn. And I came in and I played on one song. The song was called Carly's Song, I believe. And I played on the song for him and I met him. He was very nice. And a couple of months later, we both ended up in the house band of a television show called Saturday Night Live. And we were in the house band together and got to know each other. And eventually David asked me to come on the road when we weren't working on the show. We'd go do gigs, David Sanborn gigs, and we got to be tight. I would play in my music. I was always writing music. I play in my music, and he eventually began to record my music on his records, and eventually I began to produce his records. And boy, that was like 25 years ago, something like that. So got a long history, made a lot of albums together. His accent is St. Louis, definitely. He has that kind of that blues sound. His roots are really in an old school R&B. He heard the Ray Charles band when he was very young, and that really influenced him. There was a saxophone player in Ray Charles' band named Hank Crawford, and that was Dave's guy. That was the guy that David really idolized when he was coming up. What keeps surprising me with David Sanborn is that he never gets comfortable. He never, you meet so many artists who they have their sound and they have their success and they just sit back and just say, yeah, I'm cool, And David's not one of those guys. David's a guy who's always pushing, always questioning, always trying to figure out what he can do next and how he can improve, how he can change. He actually pisses some people off because he keeps changing. They say, look, I want to hear the way you played sax 15 years ago. And he's like, dude, that was 15 years ago. This is the way I play now. And that's what a true artist does, They really keep trying to grow.
When I was growing up in St. Louis, there was a basketball team there called the St. Louis Hawks. After the games, there'd be one year they had a series of concerts, and so Count Basie's band would play after one game, and Duke Ellington's band would play after one game, and Stan Kenton, and one of these shows was Ray Charles' band. It was this big, field house, like big basketball arena. We were all the way at the other end from where the band was, and Ray's band came on and did about a half an hour before Ray came out. And at one point, Hank Crawford was playing a alto solo with the band, and all the mics went out. I was at the other end of the arena. I could still hear Hank really clear. I could hear what he was playing. And I thought, yeah, I want to be able to do that. That's a good job. If that's a job, I want that job. And this was right about the time that I was sick as a kid, so the doctors recommended to my parents that I play a wind instrument for therapy. So I was 11 years old, so I said, well, I want to play the saxophone. So that was kind of it for me. That was the eureka moment, if there was one, that made me want to play the saxophone. I'm a product of my environment and the kind of musical environment I came up in. So, I was influenced by, the blues and the more blues-based players. Hank Crawford was probably the strongest influence on me early on, just the way he phrased and just in a general kind of philosophical way, just the way he approached music, using a lot of space, because Hank could just play one note and just let it hang there and let the space work for him, you know what I mean? And although I didn't maybe think about it like that at the time, I think that really had a profound influence on me. And guys that really understood the use of space, like Miles Davis, Sonny Rollins, guys that used the silence as well as the note. I think that probably is the core of wherever I'm coming from.
David Sanborn would probably describe his own sound as being very strident, very edgy. And yet, it's interesting, it's like a dichotomy. It's very edgy, but at the same time, it's very warm because of, who he is. And I have my own concept of what makes David Sanborn sound so pretty. The fact is that David has gone through, in his life, he's gone through a lot of, he's experienced a lot of suffering, because of, his physical condition just, when he was a child. And so, certainly not now, but then, it was very difficult for him. And playing the saxophone was actually therapeutic. It was something that he did in order to feel better about himself and for, therapy for his lungs. So I think music that's born out of suffering and born out of, I guess you could say, having to deal with a lot of opposition. Many times that music develops a character of its own that's very apathetic. That's a character that reaches out and connects with people, because everybody has challenges. Everybody has problems of one kind or another. So I think that's what I hear in David Sanborn's playing. He and I are very close, and I think the fact that he and I both can trace our musical roots back to Hank Crawford and Fathead Newman made us very close.
I think if you do it right, there's also always got to be a little sense of danger about it, because you're always, if you're pushing the envelope, if you're always trying to push the boundaries, you could fuck up and fall off the edge. And, that's just part of it. But sometimes you do. You're out there and you go, where am I? And I think that's true of everybody. But the great thing about improvising, and jazz in particular, is that, it's all about kind of getting out of those situations, like being an escape artist. So and I think that's what makes it interesting. It's because you can kind of paint yourself into this corner, and then trying to get yourself out of that in an interesting way. And that's where the creativity comes in, and that's where the interaction comes in. Because you're not there alone. It's not just about you, it's about everybody. It's about all the musicians. It's not like, I don't ever feel like I'm making it happen. I'm just part of the whole of an ensemble that, we're all in this together here. And we're all trying to make the music happen. So it's not all on, my shoulders to make something happen. Sometimes it's just a matter of trying to get out of your own way and just kind of letting it go for a minute. And that's sometimes a hard thing to do, because you got to let a certain amount of your ego go. I've listened to hundreds of hours of the music of McCoy Tyner, the music of Herbie Hancock, Roy Hargrove, Kirk Whalum, James Carter, all of these people. I've heard in various contexts hundreds of hours of these guys' music. And, in some cases I've played with them. In other cases, I grew up with them. Grew up listening to Herbie, and I grew up listening to McCoy, with Train and I remember McCoy's first solo record, Inception. It's a great record. And I remember I remember the first time I heard ESP, with Herbie playing on that. It was amazing. And so this is stuff that shaped my life. What Roy played on the D'Angelo record, and when I heard him with the Latin big band, that stuff, that stays with me. That's with me forever. I have great admiration and respect for all the people that are on this cruise. And Marcus is somebody I've known for a long time and worked with very closely for years. And I always learn something from these people. And I think that's the key for me, is just keeping an open mind and always learning. I try to learn something every day. Music to me is about, it is life. It's not only what I do, it's kind of who I am. What music to me is about being in the moment. And if you're present in the moment, then you experience everything that life is. And as music is a great metaphor for that, because if you want to make the music really happen, you have to surrender to the moment. And when you do that, when you're really in the moment, that's when the music really happens. Because then you can interact with everybody else, because you're not thinking about what you just did or what you're gonna do. You're just doing what you're doing, And that to me is a great lesson about how to live your life. It's about being in the moment. So that's what music means to me. the interesting thing about a situation like this is that you're in a very contained, obviously enclosed environment, and the way you interact, not only with people on the ship, but also the other musicians is a little bit different. You're on a much more intimate level. I think, for example, the other night Roy Hargrove sat in with me, and he and I've known him ever since he first came to New York, but we've never actually played together. So that was the first time, we played together. And I mean, in my opinion, he's one of the most brilliant musicians around today. I mean, as a player, as a writer, just a musician, he's a brilliant guy.
Sanborn's, Marcus, and Roy. I consider us all musical and spiritual brethren in this grand task of being able to help and heal others through the power of music. Music acts as in its purest form, acts as a healing salve to others, or healing salve to all, The main thing that really comes to mind is, even though we're on a cruise ship and the first thing you wind up thinking about is entertainment, I think the entertainment aspect of it represents just the superficial end of it, where there's this escapism, for a hot minute. But if you really look into the music and the practitioners of that music, you get more of a nutritional value rather than just living, up for the moment and just saying, well, hey, look at him. He's over there dancing while he's playing or something like that. Or he's holding that note this amount of time or whatever. Just looking at it from just the flash in the pan sort of thing. I mean, there's a certain alleviation of that, but to look in here and to allow oneself to be brought in to the music and to be brought into that situation, regardless of where the venue is, I think that allows for true enlightenment on all levels to come through, particularly in the arts, where it might open you up for other experiences later on, and that you can pass on to others that you received as a result of this encounter. And as far as Marcus in particular, I find that we share a whole lot of passion in what we do, and I've been a fan ever since David Sanborn's Run for Cover, that whole album, the Voyeur album that he was on, and I was like, man, this cat's he's got to have a turkey leg as far as all the bass that he's playing and stuff, and it's tasty. It's not just bombastic and all, but it's tasty and it's clean and it's greasy at the same time. I mean, how many people can actually get all those attributes going in one particular performance, and that's par excellence, and to be able to be in such company, I think also enhances yourself and gives you other things to think about. We're all works in progress. just want to be known as somebody that's just rash and playing, you know, because the world around us isn't just built off of loud sounds. I mean, there are medium, pianissimo sounds. I mean, there's the RPC sound. As one of my band directors, Mr. Rogers, back at home says, RPC is rat pissing on cotton. That's that type of softness, you know, where you can't hear it. So, and everything in between, you know, between RPC and bombast, there's a whole gamut of dynamic levels that are very tasteful and pleasing to not only the practitioner, but also to the listener as a whole.
I don't think people were ready for James Carter. I don't think people were as familiar with him as they should be. And even if you are familiar with James Carter, hearing him on record and then being in his presence are two completely different things, because he's got such a powerful personality on his horn. And when you're there in the room with him, it's just like, it's really unbelievable. It's so forceful, and he's so committed to what he does, and you really feel that when you're in the same room with him. And I think he really blew a lot of people's minds in the concert hall when he played with his, when he played his music with us, and then later on he played in some of the clubs, you know, and people got to see the other sides of him. And I think people left this cruise with a deep, deep respect for him.
Definition of feeling, something that when you listen to like the third movement of Love Supreme, Pursuance, and the immediate cry and the intense wailing aspect of being able to be thankful for what the Creator has given you, and the urgency of wanting to pay that gratitude in music and in song, and feeling it, you know, throughout the various energy centers. I mean, you're getting fed up in your head, you're getting fed in the heart, lump in your throat, you know, you wind up feeling it down here as a result of, you know, and knowing that even though this was something that was done over 40 some odd years ago, there's still that link that you're able to identify with in 2000 whatever, and say, wow, I dig that, you know, and feeling to be able to align oneself with those same thoughts and with the same feelings that you received, and wanting to give that back to others in how you're able to give gratitude to the Creator. And that's basically feeling for me.